Hi, the Bible Museum recently had I guess, an exhibition and presentation about the Shroud of Turin. And the presentation, unfortunately, only touched on the some art aspects of some guy wrote a book about uh, the art of the shroud and how the shroud affected art during the time and so forth. So it's a little disappointing in that regard, and so I thought I would do a very quick summation of the most important points about the shroud from a scientific and artistic perspective. So, of course, you know the Shroud of Turin was a uh, cloth that purports to be the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. And it is this light imprint on the cloth. And it wasn't until the advent of photography when someone took a photograph of the shroud, he noticed that the negative looked like a photographic image. And since then, we have discovered a lot of interesting information about the shroud, and of course, debate about whether it is real or fake, etc., etc. So, and I would like to talk about how artists and how art actually knew the shroud, or knew the shroud was older, much older than supposedly revealed by the carbon 14 dating. And you'll see it for yourself. So, some of you might remember this very famous picture of the reveal of the carbon 14 dating of the shroud. And the first thing we notice is that it was a very unusual way to present the data. A very sensationalistic, not really a scientific reveal. And we see that in the blackboard behind, they said it's carbon dating said the shroud is a medieval item. However, today we know that the original test protocol, the scientific protocol, was violated. They did not follow the agreed upon protocol. Instead, what happened was the sample they used was cut from an area which they knew, everybody knew, was the most contaminated area on the shroud because it was an area that was handled when people picked up the shroud and touched the shroud throughout the centuries. Another thing we know, and we knew it way back then already, this is not new. We've known for decades that the tests were not properly controlled. It was not a scientifically run test because every lab knew immediately which sample was the shroud sample and which sample was the control sample. This was due to the distinctive herringbone weave of the shroud, and the control sample was not the same type. All right, so another thing we might want to think about is the British Museum refused to release the raw data for 30 years. It was not until a successful lawsuit recently in 2017 that the data was released. And you might ask yourself why this was the case. And it looks like today now we know why they kept it hidden. Now, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, doesn't it? But so, yeah, sometimes the conspiracy is real. So, and here's why. Here's why they hid it for 30 years. The latest finding is that the area that was tested was newer cloth, which was rewoven into the original. And we'll take a little more information about this. And so we find that the claim that the medieval date was a 95% confidence was itself a con. That it had to be hidden for 30 years. You know, it's one of those things where the public is too dumb to understand, you know, if we give you the real data. Well, in this case, we know that the reason was the raw data shows that the sensationalistic press conference itself was a con job. And if you prefer to watch a video, of course, in 2008, way back then, we already we had the data that the why this was the case. This was, in fact, on the Discovery Channel, and you can read about it in the PDF link I show here, and another link there. And this was reconfirmed in 2019. There's a typo there. It's not Casablanca. There was an autocorrect. It's Casabianca. Tristan Casabianca, a French researcher, filed a legal action against the British Museum, which oversaw the carbon-14 testing in 1988. And the museum finally was forced to release all the raw data, showing the embarrassing facts that they really screwed up the dating. And they knew that there were numerous dates obtained that were outside of the medieval date. Unfortunately, for decades, the public was fooled into thinking that this was a scientific finding. Now, ironically, it was two non-scientists, Joe Marino and Sue Benford, who theorized that the sample had been the site of a 16th century reweaving, very skillfully done, to repair some of the damage that the shroud had accumulated throughout the ages. The reweaving was cut diagonally across the sample, and this, they theorized, explained the bad carbon-14 result, bad from one perspective. So you can see here a figure that proposed the why we got the results we did. And so you can see in figure 6 weave pattern inconsistencies that they noted by the Albany International Research Company. They noticed, hey, something's fishy about this. And one researcher, Ray Rogers, a distinguished chemist from Los Alamos National Lab, set out to disprove their theory, show that the Benford theory was wrong, and instead he was stunned to find that they were right. The samples were dyed to match the surrounding material, and his findings were peer-reviewed. The carbon dating was valid, yes, okay, in one sense, but the sample was not of the real shroud. And I mentioned here Barry Schwartz because he is the Jewish member of the original STURP Shroud research team. He was the photographer who runs the Shroud.com website today. And some of the information provided on the site, a lot of papers. You might like to take a look at it sometime. However, so I mentioned how artists actually knew way before, or we could say that art itself showed us that the so-called scientific dating must have been wrong. And this is very plain to see. We can trace the history of the shroud back to 525 AD and maybe even to 30 AD. And we can do this by, if we compare early representations, early, art of Christ, around 300 AD, you can see that Christ here in these representations, Greek, Greco-Roman type, he's clean-shaven, right? No beard. The most obvious thing. And from around 600, circa 600, we see that the representations of Christ dramatically change. And when you compare them to the imprint on the shroud, you can see all these points of congruence that show that they are in fact based on the shroud. Here's a Christ Pantocrator, circa 600, and here's a gold coin, circa 692, again, clearly based on the shroud. I mean, come on, all right? So, so just from that, we can see that obviously the carbon-14 dating was clearly wrong if you follow the art. Now, if you're thinking, well, maybe it was painted. Here's a photo of Elizabeth Piesack, a very famous artist who's drawn a lot of murals, commissioned to do a lot of mural art, and she tried to recreate how you would have had to paint, set up the conditions to paint the image on the shroud, and that you would have no outlines. All right, the shroud has no outlines. You couldn't use outlines. You would have to work from a height of 15 feet to get that at the same angle. And for the dorsal or back view, the model would have to balance on the tip of the nose, one hand and one knee. And that's something that's very probable. But the worst problem, of course, is we know that there's no the shroud is not a painting. Although there are traces of some pigments on the shroud, we know that they're from when the shroud was touched to paintings to kind of sanctify them or authenticate them. But the image itself is not paint. So important to remember, and these are well-known, agreed upon scientific findings. There's no paint. Today, every scientific test points to its authenticity, and we can discuss what that means later. Okay. But 3D information is encoded in image. It's not like a normal photo. You can't just take a photo of a person and create the same effect, because the shroud image has 3D information, which encodes how far each feature was from the cloth. And this does not happen with a normal photograph. Okay? The blood is real human blood. Although the test to find that out was unauthorized. Cardinal Balestrero says that Giovanni Rigi had no authority to take the sample, but he did. So, the blood was transferred to the cloth before the image was created. There's no image underneath. Right? So underneath the blood stains, there's no image. Halo tests on the blood test positive for serum albumin. Extraordinarily high levels of bilirubin is why the blood looks too red when you first see it, and it's due to hemolysis, which is a rupturing of red blood cells caused by shock. So it's not just regular blood; it's someone who suffered a tremendous amount. The pollens that have been found in the shroud are consistent with the alleged history of the shroud, where the shroud was supposed to have been during all this time, all right, in the Middle East and so forth. The dust from the foot area are consistent with the unique limestone found only in the Jerusalem area. The wounds and the anatomical details are unknown. The details really were things that were unknown until modern times. It's not until today we look at the wounds, we look at the details, and we say, oh yeah, these are things which a medieval person would not have known to forge. Okay. So, for example, the wounds on the hands, they appear to be on the wrist instead of the palms as depicted in most art. Right? This is because it is thought that experiments show that hammering in a nail on the palms would not bear the weight of the body. And so probably they were nailed on the wrist in crucifixions. And I believe it's called the area of Desto. The position of the thumbs is consistent with a crushing of the nerve in the hand due to the nail. Again, the blood stains, showing serum, etc. Especially the serum, for example, it's a detail which, again, to modern science is known to have significance, but probably not in medieval times. There are lots of medical details which you can see from the image, which are consistent with the gospel accounts. And for example, we see a lot of serum around, for example, the wound in the side, and this is what John describes as the flow of blood and water from the spear wound. And again, the most important thing to remember, no matter all the claims of it's fake, and we've shown it's a fake, the most important problem, which no one still wants to address when they claim it's a fake, is that the image is unexplained by all known natural means. The scientific tests that have been done on the image show it is not a scorch, like when you leave your iron on a piece of cloth for too long. It is not a painting. There's no pigments, deforming the image. It is not a photograph because, again, the photographs do not encode the 3D image, the 3D information we find on the shroud. They're very, very different when you run them through a 3D image analyzer. So really, if it's a fake, how was it made? It's some genius discovered a way to create this image back hundreds of years ago. Okay, believe what you will, I suppose. But if this was a CSI episode, everything from a CSI perspective matches with authenticity rather than the opposite. Okay. So again, repeating that, how was the image formed? Well, again, lots and lots of experiments have been done, and the closest we have come is it looks like some kind of atomic radiation. Mark Antonacci, working with Dr. Art Lind. Dr. Art Lind is a retired physicist and distinguished fellow from the Boeing Company and McDonnell Douglas Aerospace. They suggest doing some more experiments to validate this, and what they call the historical consistent method. In 2011, researchers managed to replicate the type of coloration and the depth of the coloration we find on the shroud using a 40 nanosecond burst from a UV excimer laser. Now, just think about that. This is the only way we know of today to replicate what we're finding on the shroud image. They put it another way. The body image was formed by a sort of electromagnetic source of energy. Now, if you still believe the shroud was a medieval item or, around there, you have to explain this. Until you've explained this, you've really proven nothing. You've explained nothing. All right. So very, very important. There's still every now and then an article will pop up. Oh, the blood stains, we prove they're fake, or the blood flows are fake, or whatever. But never addressing the matter of how the image was formed, and now we know why. Right? When you read an article about the shroud is a fake, look for the explanation of how the image was formed, and you know that it's a half-baked article. here's a really great source of a summary of the Shroud research up till now. I just found that today. So I hope this has been useful. And so ultimately, of course, one can say, well, you can never really prove it's real. Okay, but we can deal with probabilities. We can deal with the things we know. We know that the image formation today can only be explained by some sort of particle radiation. If you believe if you believe it's fake, well, what does that mean? So what if it's real? Two questions. What if it's real? What if it is indeed the burial shroud of Jesus Christ? Well, if it is real, then perhaps the explanation of how we got this image, or really the negative of this image, something happened. Something happened to produce some sort of burst of particle radiation transferring this image to the cloth. What was that? Well, if it is real in the sense that it is really the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, and well, if you're looking for an explanation, one might speculate about the resurrection. Something happened during the resurrection, or at least while Jesus was in this state, dead in the tomb. Something happened to create this image. And then you really have to ask yourself what it means, the claims that Jesus made about himself, that he was indeed God in the flesh, and why C.S. Lewis says, you can't just say Jesus was a great teacher, or because Jesus, unlike other teachers, claimed to be the ultimate true God. And of course, you have lots of nutcases who might do that during this during history, but Jesus did that. So either he was a nutcase, a lunatic, or he really thought he was God, or he was a liar because he knew he wasn't God, but he claimed to be, or he was Lord. You can't just say he was some great teacher, right? That's the dilemma, the trilemma that Christ left us with. You can't just say he was a great teacher. He was either a liar, lunatic, or Lord. What if it's a fake? Well, okay, so what if it was a fake? Well, number one, you have to seriously explain how this image was created in medieval times. Okay, if you can't really think of a scenario of that, then you really don't have an alternative opinion. You just have some kind of I don't know, some kind of visceral reaction. But what if it's fake? Okay, let's say we find out it's fake somehow. Let's say we find out the mechanism, all right, how they did this in medieval times. Well, then all we get is, wow, it's an amazing piece of art, and so you still have to deal with the actual historical arguments for the resurrection of Christ, which was presented in another video. So you have some really ingenious faker from medieval or pre-medieval times, actually from circa 600. So it's not medieval, it's 600 AD. We know that from just looking at the art. And in those times, someone produced this. If they did, it's just, again, an amazing testament to a human ingenuity. That's it. But amazing piece of art. But of course, it does not disprove the resurrection. You still have to deal with the trilemma and the two undisputed historical facts that do point to the empty tomb and the resurrection. Okay, so hopefully this was a fun exercise, and I'll see you in the next video whenever I do make it.